These are the best controller, graphics, and audio settings for Modern Warfare 4. And stay tuned to the end of this video for my pro controller settings. And without further ado, let's start with the in-game controller settings. Make sure you hone in the proper horizontal and vertical stick sensitivity for you. For me, it's 1.65 and 1.65. Anywhere from like 1.35 to 1. Maybe 8 or so would be standard unless you're like a high sense player or something like that. For me, I play Claw, so I swap my L1, R1 with L2, R2. Going down here, controller vibration you can have on or off. Dead zone inputs, you want to go in here. This is probably the most key setting of all controller settings. Make sure that your dead zones to some extent match these on screen here. The most important ones are going to be your left stick max, lowering it down to like 70. This helps with rotational aim assist, reaching the fastest strafe speed as quick as possible. And then the right stick min, you want to make sure that you have this down anywhere between 3 and 1, maybe 0 if you have like a brand new controller or something like that. Right stick max, I do lower this to 95, but that's more personal preference. Tabbing over to the aiming tab for sensitivity multiplier, I don't mess with any of that. I do go into the aiming advanced settings. However, this is probably one of the most important controller settings here. ADS sensitivity transition timing, make sure this is on instant. By default, it's gradual, and your aim will be a lot snappier if you change that to instant. You also want to go to your aim response curve type and make sure that's dynamic. Here's where you can also mess with the custom sensitivity presume if you feel like it. For me, I don't. And then we can back out, make sure target aim assist is on. I do go into the motion sensor function advanced settings and turn FOV sensitivity scaling off. I don't think this really impacts much though. It's been more of a placebo setting for a lot of Call of Duty players. Going over to movement, there is no omni movement in Modern Warfare 4, but there is tac sprint. But what I like to do, just to make sure you don't get caught tac sprinting as often, go into sprint assist and turn this on. Don't do tactical sprint assist. Instead, scroll down to movement advanced settings afterwards and turn your tactical sprint activation on single tap run. This makes it so that by pushing forward on your left stick, you'll go into a default sprint. All you have to do is click your left stick once and then you'll go into tac sprint. What this does is stops you from spamming tac sprint as often, and ideally then you'd only use it when it's necessary and not as much relying on tac sprinting, especially when you're close quarters and you want to just sprint, because the big difference is the sprintifier from default sprinting to tac sprinting. Going back into the movement settings, I do turn corner slice on. That is personal preference. I go into slide dive behavior. Make sure that you either have this on slide only or hybrid. The reason that you want to do so is when you do tap to slide, there is a delay. It says it in the game. There's a slide and dive activation delay, which you can definitely notice in game. So for the purposes of responsiveness, make sure that this is on either hybrid or slide only. And then going over to the combat tab, I don't believe I change any of these settings. The only one that could be important is tap to reload versus prioritize interact. In multiplayer, we don't really worry about that one as much though. Up next are the graphics settings specifically for PC Modern Warfare 4. Some of these, of course, will be subjective depending on your build. I've had my PC optimized and I know that these are the optimal settings for me. This is a good baseline of settings to work towards, but just because it works for my build doesn't necessarily mean it will for yours. Anyway, make sure that you have display mode on full screen exclusive. Choose your monitor, choose your graphics card. For me, my screen refresh rate, I make sure that it matches my monitor. For me, going through my Elgato, I need to make sure this is 120, so that's why I have this there. Display resolution, I play in 1440p. Display gamma, I have this on 2.2. Gamma and brightness, this is personal preference as well. Mine's on 50. NVIDIA reflex low latency, I have this on plus boost. This is typically what you use when you want your graphics card to be performing a little bit more. Eco mode preset, I have this on custom with VSync gameplay and menus off. Custom frame limit. Make sure that this is higher than your screen refresh rate just so that you're pulling more frames than your screen will be able to show. And continue to scroll through here, I have HDR off. Now we're going to go into the quality. To set this to custom, you just need to go to render resolution and go up and down one. I turn dynamic resolution off, upscaling sharpening fidelity cast at 100. If you struggle with frames, you can do DLSS, but it doesn't look as crisp as fidelity cast. Frame generation off, ray tracing off, VRAM scale target at 80 with variable rate shading on. World and weapon motion blur I have off. Depth of field, this is an interesting setting that you want to make sure that you actually have on. I'll show a clip here. The way the depth of field works in Modern Warfare 4 is a little bit different than previous CODs. When you're using iron sights, it actually blurs out the bulkier parts of the iron sights, meaning that depth of field for the weapon actually is more viable for iron sight weapons compared to previous years. So make sure you don't go in here and turn this one off. You want to keep it on. Scrolling down to details and textures, for everything, pretty much we have low. Texture filter, low. Detail quality, low. Particle resolution, very low. Bullet impacts off. Persistent effects off. The shader quality and texture resolution are locked on high. This might be for the COD Next build or the beta build. We'll have to wait and see. For the shading quality, I have low. On-demand texture streaming is minimal. Local texture streaming quality is low. In-game video quality standard. Same thing with the shadow quality. It's locked right now, but if you can lower this, it might not hurt. Shadow filtering, I have this on low. Screen space on low. Occlusion and screen space lighting low. Screen space reflections off. Static reflection quality low. The environment, these are locked, but deferred physics quality went off, weather grid off, and water quality. I keep this on all just to make it a little bit easier to see through the water. Now, if we go over here to view, this is very subjective. For me, the FOV that I like most is 100. Anywhere from like 107 to like 95 is good for controller. If you're on keyboard and mouse, you can bump this up to like 120 or so. The enhanced FOV, I haven't messed around with this too much, but the idea is that it gives you more space to see in your peripheral, meaning you can bump this up to 120 without it impacting your aim assist. Cutting back in here because I did actually get a chance to check this out. So this is my default 100 FOV without the enhanced FOV. And this is with enhanced FOV on. You see it gives kind of like a fisheye lens, which is good because you get to see more of your peripheral. However, I'm not so certain that I really like this. It definitely feels weird. It kind of feels like a helmet cam when you're running around with it. So I don't know if this is the type of thing where it'll take a little while to get used to, or if there will be any competitive benefits yet. But for now, I'm keeping this setting off just because it feels a little bit weird for right now. But definitely give this setting a try because it might be the one for you. Vehicle field of view doesn't really matter. You can do wide. The first and third person camera view, make sure that this is all the way down to minimal. And then that is the remainder of the graphic settings. Up next, we're going over to audio. I keep master game volume on 100. You can turn down the gameplay music and cinematics music volume. I'm keeping them on now just for the sake of playing the beta. Once we're playing competitively, you want to make sure they have the music volume down. Make sure, of course, that your speakers are set to your PC speakers. I do turn on asymmetrical hearing compensation, reduce tinnitus sound. I have this on as well. And then the voice chat settings here are dependent on your build. You want to go into the interface settings as well. There are some important settings in here that you want to make sure you change. None really on this first part, but if you go over to readability, scroll down to color customization, then color filter, make this on filter 2. Color filter target, put this on both. And then world color intensity, make sure that this is on 100. Go over to gameplay HUD. After this, you want to go into the HUD bounds and increase this as close to the center of the screen as possible. This makes it so that you can see your minimap a little bit easier. Scrolling down here, I turn HUD widget shake off just because that adds a bunch of shake that you don't necessarily need. Compass, you can leave this on or off. You want to scroll down to crosshair lines and make sure that this is static. You can also go in here and adjust the crosshair color if you feel like it. This is what I use. And then hit marker and damage-based hit markers, leave those on. Here are some other settings if you want to be able to turn those off. And that is it for the interface. You also want to go into account and network and make sure that your dismemberment and gore effects are off. And last but not least, I want to go over my scuff settings, particularly for the scuff Omega. Left thumbstick preset, I have this on exponential. And then on the right, I keep this on linear. I also go into both and make sure that my mid dead zone is down to 0 for the left. And I lower my max dead zone on the left to 15%. On the right side, I keep this both on 0. The Scuff app is also where you can go to adjust your paddles. And then same thing for recalibrating your thumbsticks. If you don't have a Scuff Omega, there are websites that you can do that. For example, the DualShock calibration tool. And that is all for my Modern Warfare 4 settings. If this video helped you out, like and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time at lunchtime.